today Karen and I are going to be talking about the differences between Merida and San Cristobal. We were in Merida. How long were you in Merida for?
I would say 6 months.
6 months?
Yeah, with a little break in between.
Yeah, and I was there for about 1.5 years, so I feel like I understood more Merida than I do San Cris. So this is a little bit more my first impressions of San Cristobal, vice, you know, a seasoned, I've been here forever kind of response. But nonetheless, I noticed so many differences. So today we're going to talk about it, and this is a collaboration video. So in this video, we're going to talk about the 5 things that I noticed here in San Cris. And at the end of this video, I'm going to point to Karen's video, which you should be following her anyway, Mom on a Journey. And she's going to talk about the differences she's noticed that maybe I haven't. Okay, so the first thing Alex and I both noticed immediately is that
I think there's like more diversity and more people speaking other languages.
Yep.
And stuff.
Here in San Cris, we have a much more international vibe, international tourists, international expats compared to Merida, which was, I think, really heavily US and a little bit Canadian based.
I think the main thing is that there's just so many tourists here. I don't know if it's more condensed or what, because in Merida, there were a lot of people like living there, like a lot of expats, but this area that we're in is just so full of tourists. Like at least for me that I'm like right in the center,
Yeah.
I constantly have people being dropped off like across the street in busloads and
Carrying suitcases.
Yeah.
More transient. And so people
Yes,
aren't necessarily living here. They're coming here for a week, a month, maybe 3 months, but not really living here that long. So it's it's Pueblo Magico, so it's a tourist spot. So that makes sense that everyone would kind of come just to visit.
Absolutely.
And then leave. We also have, I think, a lot more Mexican tourists here, people from other regions of Mexico coming here, as opposed to just other countries.
Yeah, something I noticed in Valladolid and, you know, when we went to Coba and things like that, I did notice that there was a lot of Mexican tourism.
Yeah.
Even the family that we stayed at in Coba, we're planning on going to Cancun on vacation. So I did get that in the Yucatan a little bit, but here it's just such an array of like different cultures. I've noticed a lot of South American, I noticed a lot of people from Venezuela. It's just very diverse.
Yeah. I think people speak English here, not because they're catering to the US, and not everyone speaks English here, but not because they cater to the US, but because worldwide English is spoken in Europe, it's spoken in other locations, and so everyone comes here and they just pick the language that makes sense for them. So it's less to cater to us. Whereas in Merida, I think it was really US centered, it was US focused.
Like a small version of the United States.
If you're from the US or Canada and you're not sure where to go in Mexico, even though it's hot, I would say Merida is a really easy place to kind of ease into, because you do, of course there's a Mexican culture, so you're kind of easing into both worlds. Okay, so the second thing that I noticed right away is, of course, the mask, but more than just the mask.
It seems they party a lot more and they have more festivities, even during COVID. So yeah, that's fun.
They still celebrate things here. So when we first got here, the celebration of San Cristobal was in July. I forget the date offhand, but we were able to go and celebrate that. We were able to go to the church. Now, masks is optional, so I'm not saying that nobody wears a mask, but mask optional, people still gathering. An argument could be made that perhaps they're separated a little more than maybe they were pre-COVID, but I think for the most part, they kind of just live life. They celebrate, they go out, they eat, they party, they like, you know, I don't see hugs actually. Do you see hugging too much?
No, but that might be a cultural thing, to be honest.
Might be.
Because I do feel like there's a huge sense of freedom here. Like, it doesn't really matter what you want to do with your life, you are going to be respected.
Yes, for the most part. I think the only trolling I see, honestly, is from expats, because we like to do that.
The locals themselves, they do respect each other very well. They do have cultural differences, but they still are not on top of each other complaining about the other person's differences.
So still celebrations, still events outside, still mini parades, etc. happenings.
And there's still some, you know, regulatory things. You still have to wear a mask inside of the store, do your hands. Big stores will check your temperature, not every store, but that is still happening for the most part.
Yeah, and there's not as many big stores, so I think I don't notice it as much. I've only been to Walmart once, so Walmart had the same precautions that Merida Walmart had.
I have noticed this little Parisian place, all of a sudden, now they only let 2 people per family.
Oh,
That's new.
that's good to know. That's good to know. Of course, I only have 2 in my family, so it affects you more than I.
It does, yeah. But just to know that the mandates are changing, I think.
And I think each store does what they think is right for the protection of their customers and their employees.
And they're a big chain.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's number 2. So related to Karen's number 2, you should be watching her video again. The Facebook culture is also different here. I have a suspicion it's more Mexican because I find this similar when I was investigating what city to move to next. This was kind of normal, which is when you go to an expat, of course, I'm only going to English-speaking Facebook groups, but in the English-speaking Facebook groups, I found a lot less community-based, a lot less people saying, hey, we're doing a play date on Saturday, let's join, or hey, does anybody want to get together? I found mostly selling, right? Products that they sell that might be geared towards children or geared towards families, but at the end of the day, they're not necessarily inviting you to come and play, to come and meet. Whereas again, Merida had Facebook groups solely for the purpose of helping each other out with, answering general questions, helping each other out with play dates, where to go, and much less selling. In fact, there was a WhatsApp group in Merida where some of the local community would start selling as, again, I really think this is like a Mexican culture, a Mexican use of social media, where there was some arguments and a lot of the locals left the WhatsApp group because so many Americans, this just US nationals, got angry at being sold to when it's the cultural difference, I think.
Absolutely. I feel like being an entrepreneur is so organic here. Like in the US, if a family member starts selling, you might be annoyed by the constant, reminder that they are selling something. And here, it's just part of the culture. It's normal for anybody to sell whatever they're capable of making.
And I think there's pride. There's pride in my best friend is starting to sell makeup. My best friend is opened a little coffee shop where they do whatever. There's pride in it. There's a lot of sharing and a lot of liking of selling posts because they're very supportive of that here. Whereas in the US, we're like, oh no, anti-MLM, anti-selling. That does not happen here. No. But on the flip side, again, much less with using social media. And I think it's because they have actual relationships. So if you want to hang out on Saturday, you can call, you can text, you can WhatsApp, but I think the expectation is that you know them and you ask them directly as opposed to kind of this broad, hey, I'm going out Saturday, anybody want to join kind of conversation.
Yeah, which, I totally understand and I think is great, but for nomads, it makes it a little bit harder. So I think, we kind of made do. We figured it out and we started inviting people ourselves.
Yes, creating our own mini community of expats, of people that are new to the area. One, because we need to learn, I love having expat groups because I can ask the silly questions. Where do I get my water? Where do I, best doctor, best place to buy, whatever. I like those groups. And so creating it was pretty important to me. Okay, so the third thing that I noticed is we're not as technologically inclined here. So Merida, first of all, did not enjoy updating their websites or Google, etc. Same for here. But again, unlike Merida, which Merida has a population of close to 1 million people, they do have all the apps. So Uber Eats, Rappi, a lot of stores had their own delivery app. So if you wanted something delivered in Merida, you have no problems. It was really a great place to be for the most part when it came to the virus and everyone being stuck at home because you could still get lots and lots of deliveries. Here, it's definitely all WhatsApp. It's definitely knowing who you're talking to as opposed to having just a simple app that you can use. So it's much less app friendly.
Being that their entrepreneurial spirit comes from a basic place, a natural place, this is just part of their life. There's certain things that are just known here. You just know that the guy that sells eggs in the corner delivers if you do this, this, and this, right?
Yes.
But for somebody who's coming from the outside, that is not as apparent. We don't always know how to order, we don't always know how to get delivered. We have a guy in my neighborhood that goes around in a bike with a basket full of fresh fruit and vegetables, and he knows what doors to knock on. He knocks on my neighbor's door all the time, but
because he knows that the neighbor purchases.
Yes, but I don't know how to get him to knock on my door because I've never been able to talk to him.
Got it.
But so there are ways that people get things delivered. It's just when you're a tourist, you're just not aware of it.
Yes, and more here than in Merida. I've noticed that some stores, some restaurants, bakeries are only open on certain days. And so you really have to pay close attention because, again, Google might not be updated. I will say, however, that unlike Merida, where if somebody says they're open at 5, and this is if they're telling you in person, still give them an hour, give them an extra time in Merida. Here, if they say 5 o'clock, they probably mean 5 o'clock. Pretty close.
Yeah, that's true. But like she said, there isn't like a 9 to 5 schedule that most people keep. There is no most people anything. So some places are open 1 to 6, some places are open 8 to 1. It's very random and really dependent on what they want, which I totally love as an entrepreneur that used to work crazy hours. I would get up at 2 o'clock in the morning. I totally appreciate the style of entrepreneurship that they do what is right for their life.
Yeah, and they don't let it stop. Like, I think in the US, again, the barrier to entry for entrepreneurs is high because we expect once you're open, we need you to be open all the time. Once you're a photographer, you should be available at all times. Whereas here, I think a lot of people probably do have multiple jobs, multiple things that they do. And so maybe only once a week they can open for something. Maybe they share a building with another company, and so they only use it when that company is able, when it works out. So it's much more organic, much more getting to know, much more adventurous.
Yeah.
That's the viewpoint I try to spit on it. It's not an inconvenience when my favorite bakery isn't open at a particular time. It's just an opportunity for me to find someplace else that has yummy food as well, or yummy products. That's the viewpoint that I look at it. And again, from the entrepreneur side, they're building the life, hopefully, of their dreams, and I have nothing but respect for that.
And again, from the entrepreneurial side, I totally respect the idea of being able to keep prices low because they're sharing a space.
Yes.
Yes. Like there's so many little things that we don't realize that they do that allows us to have really low prices. So
it's win-win.
Yeah.
It's a win-win.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, and so the last thing I noticed, and again, I noticed this before I came here, I noticed it in the Facebook groups, and then even as I'm here, is tying in with the international. It's a lot more raw here. I think it's a lot more uncensored, perhaps because it's a backpacker kind of environment. Not to say it's not family friendly, but the tourists coming through, the majority I think are single. I think they're backpackers, I think they're couples, and so their interests may not necessarily be kid-friendly from a US perspective. As we're walking the streets, we can see a lot more of the poverty. We can see a lot more diversification of cultures and beliefs. If somebody's walking around without shoes here, yes, it could be poverty related, but it could also be hippie related. It could just be that they believe in, I'm gonna use the word grounding.
Rooted,
yes,
in touch with Mother Earth.
Or it might also be just health related, because I've heard that it's healthier to walk without shoes because then your foot muscles, whatnot. So my point is just that everyone's kind of allowed to do what they want to do, and some of those things may not be, from a US perspective at least, considered child friendly. I like it. I like when Alex observes something that maybe is not G-rated, and then we can talk about it. So I like it, but it is something that I notice because it's different, right? In the US, I think we're very protected. Even when we're angry about something, we still protect ourselves. Whereas here, I think the locals are much more likely to just say it like it is, using the same terminology that they might with an adult. Although I think our tour guide the other day, Alex was the only child there, and so I do think he censored himself a little bit, but generally I find that people just say whatever's on their mind. If they have a particular fetish, we're going to hear about it, and I'm gonna have to explain to Alex what that fetish might be. Lots of unschooling, lots of world schooling happening here.
Yeah, I actually love that about this town.
Yes.
I've always been against the touristy vibe, and even though we're in a very touristy area,
yes.
It's touristy for different reasons than what I'm accustomed to. So the whole Mickey Mouse idea, right?
Yes.
Like when you go to Disney World, everything is perfect and pristine and everybody's nice to you. You're not gonna necessarily find that here.
Yeah.
People are more honest and choose to just be themselves as opposed to what you think is the right thing, right? So I've loved that for my kids because they get to interact with different cultures and different people and understand that you can't relate to everybody in the same way, which is definitely one of the things that I've had to learn too.
Yes, and you have to slow down and pay attention because your first instinct might not be right. The first instinct in the US, if I see somebody without shoes, is I assume poverty related, right? Finance related. Here, I think it's a 50-50 shot perhaps on why somebody might not wear shoes. It requires you to slow down and observe so you can understand the culture and the cultures. Because again, it might not be a Mexican culture that we're observing.
Absolutely.
Could be anything.
And another thing, like the people sleeping in random areas of town are not because of homelessness usually. So it could be, you know, because of a little extra drink.
It
or,
could be, yes.
You know, maybe
they
they're
can't
just
go home
sleeping.
just yet.
Or maybe they've been working a lot. Like I've seen kids sleeping in corners. And
Yeah.
So it's not what you would assume.
It gets
Something
real.
else.
It gets real here, which means you can't just sugarcoat it necessarily. You have to sometimes think about it, observe a little more, and talk about it, which again, I love a lot. Please let me know if you've been here and you've noticed something else different as well. I am curious if you've been to both Merida and San Cristobal, which city do you prefer and where do you think you would most likely live longer periods of time if you can compare the two? I think, I don't want to say it too early, but I'm kind of leaning, yeah, so far, but I love them both. I love hearing from Karen because she sees things differently than I do. She notices things that I don't notice, and hopefully vice versa. And so it really helps to know more people and to have a conversation about it. At the end of this video, I will put a link to her video where she's going to talk. Is it a bit loud?
You're being really loud. I think it should be okay.
I know, but will you be okay?
But I've heard French. The sun is behind you.
Feels like it's in there.
The sun is literally behind you. Okay.